Thanks, Peter. Well, as you know,
Shall we turn the lights on?
yeah, let's turn the lights down a bit. As you know, we were planning a trip to Israel, and as time went on, the numbers increased, and eventually it was, I think we're up to 17. And then about 6 weeks before the trip, Peter Eagle decides to do some very inconvenient thing and has a heart attack and ends up in hospital. And that dropped our numbers below. There must have been a cut. There was a cut-off. Was it 16? There was some sort of numbers where you get a price break, if you know what I mean. The price goes down if you go above that number. And I think the price break must have been 15. The price break. So we dropped below the line. So then I contacted a friend of mine in Canberra, and he hadn't heard about this trip. I don't know where he was because I'd been advertising it on the internet and emails and friends and everything. And so 2 weeks before we left, he and his son paid for the trip and everything. And so we got up to 16 again, and we got the cheap price and everything. So no worries, Peter, you're okay. Yeah, so it was a great trip, and I'm going to show you slides of this trip. But this trip was a little bit different to just a tour around Israel. It was a sort of a trip where we combined a number of other aspects. And one of those aspects was speaking in Messianic congregations and youth and student conference. And the speakers came from around the world, essentially. Well, two from the United States and one from America. So in that 6 days, from Australia. I said that deliberately. Sure. So as it turned out, it was quite international with 16 people. The two speakers from the US were Dr. Russ Humphreys and Dr. John Baumgartner, both physicists, and I'm a physicist too, so there was really 3 of us physicists. But we had one guy who was a friend of mine from Japan, one from New Zealand. We had a lady join us from Finland. Isla? Was that her name? Isla.
The other Americans?
And there were other Americans. No other country though, right? That's it on the countries. Yeah, so it worked out quite amazing. The last time I went to Israel was 10 years ago, almost exactly 10 years prior. And on that occasion, I did something similar, but on that occasion I was going to Israel like officially as part of my job, professionally I should say. And I was visiting a professor at Ben Gurion University, so that was in 2006. I was on my way there, I went to a conference in Madrid, in Spain, and I spent about a week in Madrid, and then I was going to fly over to Israel to visit this professor, and then I met up with the same people who organised the tour this time. They're a young couple. The husband is Israeli, Lior, and his wife is from Finland, Joanna, or Joanna, but pronounced Joanna. So he's a Messianic Jew, and she's Finnish Christian. She moved there when she was 10 with her father, who's a journalist, and essentially went to Israel as a missionary, using journalism as his means of support and so on. On the occasion, though, I was headed to Israel last time, at the conference in Madrid, I suddenly got sick. So sick that I couldn't even step up a step. I got dizzy and exhausted and had chest pains and nausea and cold sweats and all these things like this. And I thought, if there's anywhere I want to go to hospital, it's in Israel. And so I managed to get myself to the airport in Madrid, And I was flying LL. When you fly on the Israeli national carrier, they interview every passenger individually for security checks. Whereas normally you're a little bit... Israel has very tight security on its airlines. But when you fly the national carrier, they add another layer of security. So here I am, sitting in the Madrid airport with sweat pouring off me, and I'm trying to pretend I'm healthy. And they say to me, why are you going to Israel? And I say, I'm going to visit a colleague, professor, this sort of thing, you know. And then they say, why is your middle name Gideon? We want to know why. And I told them because I like Gideon in the Bible. And they go, oh, that's good, we like that, you know. I got to Israel, to my friend's house. I was staying at the professor's house, and that night I was quite sick still. And his wife the next morning took me to Ben Gurion General Hospital. So I spent my first 2 days in Israel in hospital with a suspected heart attack. And they did all sorts of ischemia. So it's kind of funny in a way. The reason Peter didn't go is because of that. And my first trip, they thought that's what I was having, and they spent 2 full days. And remarkably, they said at the end of that, we can't find anything wrong with your heart. And they discharged me, and I was still unbelievably weak. And we're going to show you some pictures of Masada. The first place I went to with this couple that I met up with to do a tour around Israel was to climb up Masada. and this is just a few days after I couldn't lift my foot up a single step. So it was really amazing. I just kept trusting the Lord, saying, there's nothing wrong with me. But then I told my wife about Israel, that we should go back there, and I was speaking to Trevor and Robin, actually on a trip up here, up to Munta. Is that right? Or is it Munta? And so we decided to go to Israel. Also, just before we left, because, you know, there were some security issues, right, in Israel. These sort of things were happening. And there was a sort of a stabbing spree that had developed over the months before we were going to go there, right? And so Christina says to me on her way to Perth, she wasn't sure if she wanted to actually still go to get on the plane. But after going, after only, 2 days there, she says she wants to live there. The food is really fabulous. The food is like this Mediterranean food everywhere. It's like vegetables and salads and for breakfast, lunch, dinner. It's like unbelievable. It's like a foodie paradise.
It really made us want to eat our veggies.
And I just mentioned this too, that one guy who's an American and his wife who volunteer in Israel, they drove us at one point. One night they drove us from Moding to Jerusalem at night, and they were talking about safety and security, and they were saying, because they've been there a few times, and they were saying they believe Israel is probably the safest country in the world to live in. People will walk the streets at night, children will play in the streets. The Western media gives you a totally incorrect picture of what Israel is really like in terms of security and so on. Yeah, there are Muslims there. The population of Israel is 8.5 million. About 2 million are Arabs, and a large portion of those are Muslim. Of course, there's a large Christian Arab population as well, but the Arab Christians tend not to be so friendly to the Jews. And this is cultural and ethnic reasons that go back in history a long way. But okay, so that's sort of a bit of background. Israel, as you know, is pretty much the centre of the world, and it's nothing like Australia. It's like all sorts of nations sort of meet there in some ways. So I'm going to show you some slides, and at points I might ask others to make a comment or two. Now I mentioned that this tour was a little bit different. This tour involved a number of outreach ministries. And I would also add that our tour guides were biblical creationists who are both involved in archaeology. I won't say a lot more about them because actually they wish to sort of protect their identity because Israel is such a small place. They don't want to really to get out advertised what they are sort of really doing there. So they're archaeologists, and they have they have a biblical view. That means, if you don't understand what I mean by that, they hold to the historicity of the Bible. They believe you can trust the history that's written in the Bible, and their desire, their life's desire, is to recalibrate all of the artifacts in Israel to bring it into a correct timeline to be faithful to the Bible. And you can imagine if that was out, that they are in the centre of this, doing this sort of thing, that their jobs actually could be on the line.
You were mentioning that.
I haven't told only one name. Leo's like John. It's a common name.
That's right.
So in this tour, as I said, it sort of had two aspects to it. And one part of it was a creation ministry, where we spoke at different Messianic congregations, a student conference, which was about 40 students, mostly Arab Christians. This is older students, university-age students, and a youth conference of 270 Jewish children and students. They were between 13 and 20 years old. That was in one venue. I went for a day and a half, like a Friday evening through all day on the Saturday. 8 Messianic congregations. The believers, in Israel, the Jews who are believers in Christ do not use the word Christian. And there's a reason for that. So they're called Messianic, and they don't use the word church either. So they call themselves assemblies or congregations in English when you speak in English. And the reason is because of the history of the connection back through like the Orthodox Church or the Catholic Church, where they persecuted the Jews. And so they never had a very strong, they never got a good deal from, let's call the old Orthodox churches, Catholic, Orthodox, Armenian, Coptic, and so on. And so they distance themselves. They don't really want to have anything to do with them. They really don't have denomination. The total number of Messianic Jews in Israel now is somewhere around 20,000. When I was there 10 years ago, they told me the number was about 7,000. So they are growing, but they're increasing for sure. We did 3 hotel presentations. Small numbers attended, not very big. 3 speakers, myself, Dr. Russ Humphreys and Dr. John Baumgardner, both from the United States. And it was a total of 24 talks presented over 12 days, and we did a 10-day tour around Israel. You mentioned you had a day off. I never had a single day off the whole time.
Yes, you did. The last day.
Nope. Oh, when we left. Okay. And then the tour itself focused on biblical archaeology and even geology, looking at, because we had a geophysicist, and so in some places we looked at the history of Israel, even going back, well, we looked at even a cave at one point, so they were talking about in the secular world back millions of years. Of course, we were relating all that in terms of the biblical history, the 6,000-year biblical history. Okay, so the first part of the tour was a number of these meetings. This is the one at a largely Christian Arab. Now, when they are Arabs, they use the word Christian. When they're Jews, they use the term Messianic believer. So that's the difference. So these are young people who are largely Arab Christians, and it was a sort of, I don't know, probably a 2-day conference, I think. It was on the weekend.
At the Baptist camp.
Yeah. There was a Baptist camp there where these meetings were held, It has the only baseball diamond in
Yeah.
Israel. Yeah, in fact, there's 2 of them. It's quite remarkable that that even exists, I thought. Okay, yeah, so this is Dr. John Baumgartner. The previous one was Russ Humphreys. John is the geophysicist, and he spoke about the global flood, and he has developed a model to model the rapid plate tectonics in a global flood. There's a very good YouTube video of him presenting that. If you just want to search his name on YouTube, you can get that and have a look. Russ Humphreys, I should say, spoke about evidences for a young world. He's a physicist from Sandia Labs. John Baumgartner was formerly at Los Alamos Labs, which is where they made the nuclear bomb. Humphreys, in his research career, worked on fusion reactions, trying to build nuclear fusion processes. So these guys are smart guys, and they're addressing the issue of how can you believe in a young universe, a 6,000-year-old universe, a 6,000-year-old Earth, and how do you fit that into the Bible? And that was largely the topics that we're addressing, helping people to understand that you don't have to check your brain at the church door and you know, turn your brain off when you start reading the Bible. That we can understand these things from a biblical point of view, you know.
Were there ties there with CMI at all?
No. Of course, they have materials from CMI and from Answers in Genesis and Institute of Creation Research, but they have the small group of Messianic believers that run a creation ministry are independent. They're just a very small group there. I think they're called something like Creation Israel or something like that. This was at a Messianic youth meeting, a Messianic congregation, but the youth in the congregation. And I found that they were very respectful and very attentive. Now, I've been to youth group meetings in churches here. I've spoken in hundreds of churches around this country, and I found these guys were tuned in to the message. They really were. At the this is the youth conference at 270. You see across the top there, you see across here, this is like a Sputnik satellite, and this is the sun and the moon, and the planets of the solar system. They themed the conference Light Year, and the whole conference sort of revolved around space and the cosmos, and from a biblical sort of perspective. And they went to a lot of trouble to create this kind of theme, you know. The students were very, very hungry for that type of message. I took one of the messages I gave was on evolution, 8 reasons why evolution is foolish, which you could also get from YouTube if you want to have a look at that. And I took a bundle of tracts the ones I had left, probably about that thick. It's probably about 50, maybe 50 or so. And I said at the end of that talk, I said, anyone want one of these tracts? Because they're in English, right? And they largely speak Hebrew, right? Read, write, speak Hebrew. I said, you can come and get one. And they just absolutely mobbed me at the end. So, I don't know, yeah, you can possibly see the t-shirt they're wearing. They actually created a t-shirt for this camp that has Psalm 19, the heavens declare the glory of God. That's what's written in Hebrew on the back of that t-shirt. And so that's sort of the whole theme of the conference. This was the question and answer time. Russ Humphreys and myself, it was a fairly informal question and answers.
And a translator.
Yeah, and translator. Yeah, this is Michael. He was very good. He could do translating like United Nations almost. He could almost do a running, really fast translation. And he was also translator for me at a couple of other venues where I spoke at Messianic congregations later on. So he was very good. That I felt was very successful. And then this was I've just showed you a few slides here at the beginning, but these meetings were all through the period of time. We were there over 2 weeks, and we slotted these in on weekends, nights, and so on. And sometimes some of us would disappear, when these things were happening. And then we get into the tour itself. That's the little minibus, 18-seater, one for the driver and the tour guide, of course. We started, though, out in the old city of Jerusalem. I don't know if you can see that well. This is the old city, a map of the old city, and here is this part here is the famous Temple Mount at the centre of the old city. This picture I put in because it says he is the Son. He is the Son of God, or something like this. This is actually right as we first saw as we entered the old city. This is some ministry, outreach ministry there in Israel. And I thought this is really interesting that there are so many Christians there trying to reach Jews with the message. This is some mosaic of the old city itself, and it's hard to really see, but these are like rows of shops and so on. And I think this one here is meant to be the Church of the Holy Sepulchre that's in the centre of the old city. And you can see some scenes when people go around on these, what are they called, sedgeways or something. Yes. So you see modern sedgeway with the old stone wheel, you've got your new and your old together. And thanks to Trevor, he took a photograph of what the old city looked like back in the old days. And you see these long sections where the shops were, but it's pretty changed now.
So it's more covered.
Now, we were, on the first day there were 6 of us walking around the old city, and then we split up into 2 groups and went 2 different ways. 3 of us, my wife and I and Dr. Humphreys, we met up on the street. These Korean ladies at the back and this guy was he from Turkey or somewhere like that? He was an American national now.
Yeah.
So we met this group here, and they were handing out Bibles in Hebrew on the streets. They were witnessing to people, street witnessing. I thought that's pretty cool. So they tried to come up and witness to us.
And the girls and the mother, they were from Korea.
Yeah, these ones are all from Korea. Yeah, that's right.
They're being missionaries to the Jews.
Yes. So here you've got Koreans who are going back to Israel to disciple Jews, and they've got New Testaments in Hebrew they're handing out. I thought that was pretty cool. Okay, the old city. Everyone knows about the Temple Mount, right? The Temple Mount. There's 2. This is where originally Solomon built his temple. And then later in the second temple it was rebuilt somewhere around here. We don't know exactly where. This is the wall of the Temple Mount, and this is the Dome of the Rock. Originally this building was the church that was built by Constantine in 325 AD or something like that. That was later, he built it on the ruins of the Temple of Jupiter that was built by Vespasian, the emperor, and then that was eventually knocked down, or the top part of it was knocked off, and they converted it into a mosque. I think that was Suleiman or someone like that. This one here is the very famous Al-Aqsa mosque, the Mosque of the Martyrs or something like this. And at this point, part of our team decided that they would go up into the Temple Mount and have a look at the Dome of the Rock. And I think Trevor's just going to give us a few words on that. Now, Trevor, tell the whole truth.
Actually, there would have been good reasons why Gideon and Christina didn't want to go, but I think it's called insurance. But anyway, in this area, which is, I don't know how large it is, perhaps about a kilometre by kilometre, the actual area the Temple Mount is. It's interesting because you have to go up through like a boardwalk, and then you've got security guards at the top, and they are Muslims, and they're just in t-shirts, and they will ask you, the first thing they say to you, particularly if you're a man, they say, where are you from? They want to hear your accent and etc. And I said, I'm Australian. They say, oh, that's all right, go in, like this. And for the women, they're just checking, and for the men as well, to make sure you're covered. And what I mean by that your elbows are not exposed, and even there's no knees showing or anything like that. And even on the men, you can't just walk in there with shorts. That's a sacred area around there. Interesting though that there's kids playing football, soccer around there and everything like that, and mucking around with wheelchairs, etc. But that's probably okay because they're Muslims. And that's not being racist, because they really like that area as sacred, but really they don't want any non-Muslims up there. And the only reason why we got in there was this an hour that you could go up there, and generally they delayed that hour as well. That by the time we got up there, we would have had around about half an hour on there, and in other words, about 15 minutes delay getting in there, and they come around and make sure you get out before the time that hour is up anyway. But you're not going to take pictures up there holding hands with anybody, particularly even your wife or whatever. There's no kissing up there. You'd probably be beaten if you kiss somebody up there or anything like that. But if you're near your wife, they suggest that you stand, sort of a little bit of a distance, about a metre apart or half metre apart. One of the guys we went with actually wanted to go in there because they actually do pray in there. They asked him, was he a Muslim? And he said no. And they said, no, you're not going in. But it would have been interesting, as we said the other day, what if he did go in there and they knew, they found out that he wasn't a Muslim? He probably would have been either beaten or roughly handled and shown the door out. Interesting that around about 400 metres from there, that we ended up walking. There's only Rob and myself and this other chap called James. And when we were walking around, just having a look at some of the olive trees, we passed this young girl who probably would have been about 8 or 9, and she said under her breath, "You're not Muslims," like this. So obviously it showed that we weren't Muslims. And all of a sudden, we didn't really worry about it, but about 5 seconds later came a hail of stones or rocks. Some of them were quite sizable and just missing us, and hitting the wall, and that was, wow, where did this come from? So we weren't appreciated up there by certain people anyway.
And you didn't have to make an insurance claim, right?
Didn't have to make an insurance claim, but I don't think anybody got hit anyway. But anyway, interesting. That's gold at the top of that, and Saddam Hussein paid for that.
No, King Hussein of Jordan.
Oh, King Hussein of Jordan. Yeah, so paid for that. I don't know how many kilograms it is, but it's a fair bit. But anyway,
it used to be territory that was owned by Jordan until the 1967 war, and Israel took sovereignty over it. Okay, so to get up to the Temple Mount, the way that Trevor and Robin and James would have come would have been up here. There's this some channel. Is that the way you went?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And that's only open for very restricted times, as Trevor mentioned. So we walk down. This is James's back here. We walk down here, and you see this is now the famous Wailing Wall. There's 2 sections. On the left here is for men, and on the right, smaller section for women.
Oh.
I don't know why that is. That doesn't seem right, does it?
There's more women praying than men.
To go down there, though.
More wailing going on.
To actually go past this wall here and there, you have to have your head covered. And so there are a number of spots where they will lend you a kippah. You know the kippah? And you can put it on your head. So down, this is down the left, so this is the left side where the men, the Jewish men, are now all praying, and this is in under the wall. You can actually walk in underneath. There you see, so the women's section is over that end, and that's that ramp that goes up the top. They actually, I don't know if you can see it, you probably can't, but along the cracks here, they write prayers and they poke them in the cracks. So there's thousands and thousands of little written prayers that are poked in the cracks.
And they will take.
Does anyone come and collect it?
They do, and they bury them afterwards.
So you can see them wearing the head coverings, the little kippahs, the white ones. And someone's playing the shofar, right? So when Jesus comes, the Bible says with a sound of a trumpet, a great sound of a trumpet, and we learned in our Bible study yesterday that this actually means something like a reverberation or a quavering. So when Christ comes, the whole world is going to hear this trumpet sound. So I think this is kind of significant, you know.
Someone asked you, do they take the prayers out sometimes when there's too many of them?
They do. They're not.
They have that big container.
Yeah, this is technically a synagogue. It's the only open air synagogue in the world, and that whole area is a synagogue. And the rabbis have a system where they collect those prayers, and I don't know what they do with them.
Oh, they have that massive container.
Yeah, but I don't know what they do with them
I think
afterwards.
they bury them.
I think you might be right. I think they bury them. They don't burn them. I know that. Yeah. Okay, and so you've got the picture of this Western Wall, the Temple Mount inside the old city, and this is a model. Then we went to Israel Museum, so this gives you an idea of this. Here is the Temple Mount. This is the old the temple. This is a model, of course. This was built in Herod's time, and you see the old city in the model form. So this will give you a little bit of perspective of this.
What's the scale?
1/50th, 1 centimetre, 50.
Looks pretty big.
No, it's more than 150. Maybe it's 500.
It's quite a good size.
501, I think it might be.
And it used to have all the greenery and all the little shrubs, but they got all destroyed by the weather, so they didn't bother to read it.
Yeah. So this, so this section here is called Herod the Great's Pavilion. Herod the Great was the king at the time of Christ's birth. He was an Idumean from Edom, which is south of Israel, and therefore an Arab. The Edomians actually had been proselytized and converted to Judaism before Christ, some period BC. But Herod was appointed through the Roman governor, and so here he was as king of Israel, but he wasn't a Jew. So he wasn't allowed into this. I don't think he was even allowed into this area here. He had to only live up here. So he built this giant pavilion thing, so where he could visit the temple, but actually he wasn't even allowed to go anywhere near the temple, even though he was like king.
He was overseeing it.
Huh?
Overseeing it.
Well, he was, yeah, but he wasn't allowed in there. Yeah. So this is just moving around a little bit on the Western Wall. So there's a Western Wall over here from this side. We were looking at it from the other side before, and you can see if you move around the city, we're
The
sort
Wailing
of,
Wall is the Western Wall.
yeah. So the Western Wall is the Wailing Wall, yeah. And to get that in perspective of where this is, so this is the dome of the mosque, the dome of the rock. And this is on the eastern side, so the western wall is over that side. This is the eastern side, and that's the modern day city of Jerusalem over there. On the north side, so the temple is over there. This is the north side of the Temple Mount, and here you have the pools of Bethesda. You remember that in the Bible in John 5:2? It says. There was this feast of the Jews where Jesus went up, and there at Jerusalem by the sheep market, a pool which is called in the Hebrew tongue Bethesda, and it had 5 porches. Can you see the 5 porches? I'll show them to you. It took me a while to realise. There's 1 porch here, there's 1 porch there, there's 1 porch there, there's 1 porch there, and there's 1 in the middle. That's 5. So it's got 4 sides and 1 through the middle. So that's 5 porches.
All verandas.
Yeah. So the idea of this is to help us see that what says in the Bible relates to what really archaeologically they have discovered to be true, and we see a lot of that. So on the other side, that's the Al-Aqsa Mosque. So this is now that's the eastern side. So this is now the southern side, and the Western Wall is around on the other side of that. And then so looking at the model again. So we've come down on the southern side. This is the Kidron Valley. That was where a small river used to flow around the old city. And right down the bottom here, there was another river called the Gehenna River. And Gehenna River is named after this place which was called Gehinnom. But that was where before the Babylonian exile, the Jews worshipped other gods, false gods, foreign gods, right? And then they came back from the exile and they learnt their lesson and they decided they were never going to worship those false gods again. So that area down here was then only used for burning waste, and it had almost a constant fire burning in there. So the Jewish word for hell is Gehenna, and it comes from this meaning because that was the place of waste, and it was also the place of eternal fire, but it was like, because of the false gods, that's like a place of evil and darkness. And so that's where that idea comes from. So it's really the Jewish analogue of hell or purgatory in the Christian mythology, they say, you know.
That whole area of Kidron had a really stingy smell to it, didn't it? I think too.
I don't know. But as far as
they used to burn the dead bodies there too.
That's right. That's why Jesus was crucified outside the city. You could not, it's always outside the city, outside the camp, right? So everything that's foul and dirty, the waste, is always outside the city. Yeah.
There's a whole sermon on Jesus crossing a Kidron, that being a symbol of him crossing over that everything,
Yeah.
creating a bridge for us to be reconciled.
Okay, so also at the Israel Museum is this shrine to the Dead Sea Scrolls, and this is the shrine. You know, it's kind of like worshipping the words, right? So the famous Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered. Well, I think it was. They're different times, but I think it was somewhere. Anyone remember 1940s? Somewhere in the 1940s. After 48, I think. And you weren't allowed to take photos in there of the shrine, but look up on the internet. No, I didn't. I behaved myself. I had my camera hanging around my neck, but I didn't take that photograph. I did not. And so that is a replica there of the book of Isaiah. The book of Isaiah is complete. In fact, there's many complete copies of the book of Isaiah. All books of the Old Testament except one, I think it's Ruth or something, is represented in the Dead Sea Scrolls. And the difference between that and the modern Masoretic Hebrew text is minuscule, like 0.1% differences. Really tiny differences. So the Bible has been extremely well preserved by the Masoretes. The Masoretes were a Jewish sect that spent their life copying the texts and essentially devoted their life to doing that. We also went to near the Dead Sea to Qumran, which is the place where these Dead Sea Scrolls were found in these big clay pots. And at this place in Qumran was where a sect would meet. They were called the sect of the Essenes. They were like Pharisees, right? Everyone knows the Pharisees, don't you, right? Sadducees because they don't believe in the afterlife. And the Essenes. The Essenes were devoted. They were like a reclusive, isolationist type sect that lived several hundred years before Christ and spent their life around study, devotion to God, to copying the scriptures, and they lived in this really remote location. So this is the typical landscape around where they lived. And this is one of the caves where one of the pots or so was found of these scrolls of the Dead Sea Scrolls. And the story goes something like the Arab boys or something were herding their goats or something like this, and was it a goat went in there or something? They threw a rock in there to get the goat to come out of the cave, and it hit something, like breaking glass or pot or something, and went in to investigate and found it was a pot with the scrolls in it. And there's some story too about the first scrolls they found. They had a hard time selling them. No one was interested in even buying them. Some guy bought one in a Jerusalem flea market for like $100 or £100 or something like that. Of course, now they're like priceless, and they all belong to the Jewish state. So, by the way, this is a lightning tour through Israel. I took over 2,000 photographs, and you're only going to see about 70. So it's a super fast tour. It's just highlights. That's all I can do. This here I thought was significant because this was like a rock or some tablet or engraving, some sort of thing, and it's got Pontius Pilate's name written on it. Apparently there was also some history that Pontius Pilate, the naysayers have said that Pontius Pilate never existed, but it was found, and you can actually read, the V is a U because it's written in Latin, so that's Pontius Pilatus, Pontius Pilate. It's quite clear, and this stone was found in Caesarea. So here's your first map of Israel to give you some perspective. You see Jerusalem's here, Tel Aviv is here where the airport is, Netanya, Caesarea, up here you've got Tiberias, and down here you've got the Dead Sea. So the Dead Sea Scrolls was around here somewhere. And we went off to the location of Caesarea, and this is a replica. The one in the museum is the real one, and this is just a replica where they showed this. Caesarea was this city built by the Caesars, and it was very Roman in its character. I thought this is of interest. Do you remember that scandal at one point there where they said they found the bones of Jesus Christ? Do you remember that? The bones that were found in an ossuary in Israel, or in the culture. They bury a body, and after about 2 years they dig the body up and take the bones and they put them in a box. And the box is called an ossuary, and that then is stored. That was the sort of the normal method of burial. And you'll notice here, if you can read the Hebrew or the English, it actually says Jesus, son of Joseph. So that would have been Yeshua ben Yosef, or Yosef. Jesus, or Joshua, Yeshua, is actually a common Hebrew name, and so is Joseph. They're actually both common Hebrew names. So don't worry, that is not, they're not the bones of Jesus. There's a guy, Finkelstein, who's one of the leading archaeologists in Israel, and he has been, in fact, he's promoted about everything that is to disprove the existence of Jesus Christ. And he's one who's pushed this idea. But Jesus was crucified, and the method of crucifixion was more like this is a typical Roman method of crucifixion, and this is evidence of it because this is a nail through the foot bone. This is actually a sample of it. I don't think I would like to be subject to it, so they would nail their feet to the post like this and hang them over the crossbar so that they would then suffocate. So this is a real issue that, how Christ was crucified. We went up to Mount Carmel. You know the story of Mount Carmel, where Elijah slew the prophets of Baal and also of Asherah. But the Bible mentions 450 prophets of Baal that were slain, and they were not sure if they were marched down to the brook of Kishon or they were killed. I think they must have been marched down there and killed down there. But that's where Joshua defeated the false prophets. You remember the story where he got them to wet this burnt offering, poured tons and tons of water around it, and filled the trench with water, and then he called the prophets of Baal to call fire down from their God to consume the burnt offering. Of course, nothing happened, but when Elijah called on the living God, the fire came from heaven and just absolutely obliterated the burnt offering, water and all. So we went up there, and there's Trev there, and Robin standing next to the leader, Elijah. None of us take statues seriously. Don't think we do. We're just having a bit of fun here. So that was in 1 Kings 18:40, if you want to look that up, where Elijah said, "Take the prophets of Baal, let not one of them escape." And they took them, and Elijah brought them down to the brook Kishon and slew them there. Okay, so to give you perspective again, Mount Carmel's here. We're in Caesarea, and we've moved up to Carmel, and we're actually headed over towards Tiberias. Tiberias is the Lake Galilee, Lake Tiberias, Sea of Tiberias. We went over to Cana. This is the site of the first miracle, and you see the Catholics have built a church on the site. In every site that Jesus did anything, the Catholics, the Orthodox, the Armenians, the Coptics, the whatever, have built a church there, and sometimes multiple churches all in the same place. And this is apparently one of the alleged pots that Jesus converted the water into wine. Allegedly so. And even this site is allegedly the site. If you get what I mean, it's only an alleged site. So again, give you perspective, we then came from Carmel around here, and we moved over to Cana. Cana is about then halfway over towards Tiberias, and then we were headed down towards Nazareth. But at that church, at that Catholic church, that's where many people come and get married or rededicate their marriages. So there was actually 3 of them up on the stage, 3 couples. And because Jesus performed a miracle at a wedding, so people seem to go there, and they sell bottles of, the wine, wedding wine. You can imagine the trading opportunities, right? Hey, what are you laughing for? This is serious business here. Business. So on our way down from Cana, we then went down to Nazareth. And on this shop is obviously a Christian Arab shop, because this is in Hebrew says Yahweh, the tetragrammaton, Jehovah, God's name. It's the unspoken name. The Jews don't say his name. They will say Lord, Adonai, it's a Lord. They won't pronounce God's name. But here, this is very significant, what's written here. And you should understand what this means. This is in Hebrew. This is script Hebrew, so it looks quite different to the sort of square form of Hebrew. But it says, reading right to left, Yeshua, not Yeshu, or Yesu. And the reason it says that, in Israel, the name of Jesus has become a curse word. And they won't say the this word, this character, they won't pronounce that. They'll say Yesu, because it means it's like not pronouncing Jesus' name properly is like cursing him or something like that. And so this is obviously a real believer, because their sign makes a point of saying his name is Yeshua and not Yeshu. So I thought that was quite significant, that, And so remember where we are now. We've come down from Cana down to Nazareth here, just heading down a little bit. They're not that far. Israel's actually quite short. This is 40 kilometres across here, and it's probably about 100 kilometres there. Down to the bottom of Israel is around 250 kilometres. So that's probably 120 or 130 or something like that. Okay, then we were heading over to this church, which is in Nazareth, called the Church of the Annunciation. This is a church the Catholics built on the site that's claimed by them, where Mary was called by the angel Gabriel, and the Annunciation, meaning that's when she was going to, give birth or get pregnant, right, with Christ. There's a bit of a story about this. Apparently, the Pope. When was this? Do you remember? About 2000, one of the popes was going to come to Israel, and this church is in the background there, and there's all these Arab and Muslim buildings around it. And this was the main entranceway that the Muslims obviously cemented up at some point. And the Pope said he'll come to Israel. This would be the first time the Pope has ever been to Israel.
That was only last year.
No, it was 10 years ago at least.
About the year 2000.
It was when the papacy formally reconnected with Israel, with the Jews. It was about 10 years ago. It was. Anyway, the Pope at that time, this was like an official diplomatic visit, and he said, "I'll come if you, as a sort of a gesture of goodwill, you knock this down, so that people can walk in there." And apparently there was so much politics with the Muslims and Arabs and so on. Yeah, there's a mosque just opposite over here. They refused, and the Pope didn't get his way. Didn't happen. So this church is meant to hold this cave where the Virgin Mary heard the voice of the angel Gabriel, and of course they've turned it into idolatry, right? Mariolatry, worshipping her, the Queen of Heaven. Can you see up there, the Queen of Heaven? They've got her up there. But also, can you see what else is up there? Above the image of the Holy Spirit, the dove, they've got the Eye of Horus. So they're worshipping one of those Egyptian deities, the false gods. And then the Queen of Heaven, remember that Jeremiah 44:19 says, "And when we burn incense to the Queen of Heaven and poured out our drink offerings to her, did we make her cakes to worship?" So they've definitely got themselves. Of course, this whole church is all about Mary, right? Worshipping Mary. And there are many, many pictures of her around there. That clearly this Roman Catholic Church worships a God other than the living God, the creator of Israel, the creator God of the universe. We then went on to the Mount Beatitudes. This is the alleged site. This is on the banks of the Sea of Galilee, the Galilee in the background there. And this is where Jesus was supposed to have given the Sermon on the Mount. It is a very beautiful place. That's James, by the way. He's the one who tried to get into the Dome of the Rock Mosque. And it's very believable that this is a site where Jesus gave his famous sermon of "Blessed are the poor in spirit."
And what's interesting is that sea there's only one sea. It's the Sea of Galilee, Lake Gennesaret, the Sea of
That's
Tiberias.
right.
They're all one and the same.
So it's got different names: Gennesaret, Galilee, Tiberias, and it's named according to which town you're in. Which is the biggest town at the time? Our guide explained it. So if it was Tiberias, it was the biggest city at the time. It's then now called Sea of Tiberias. But if Gennesaret, the very small village, if that was the largest at some time, it would be called the Sea of Gennesaret, or Gennesaret. Okay, and so you can look that up in chapter 5. There's Christina there. She's praying inside the temple here, this church. Yes.
Matthew.
What's that?
Matthew chapter 5.
Ah, very
John,
good.
John.
Thank you very much. I was actually put that in deliberately to see if anyone's awake. There's only one person awake. But what I noticed is, if you look up on this sort of dome above it, above this altar here, they have their sun god. And the Catholic Church are very much into sun worship. Here's quite interesting. One of the popes, Pope Paul, the sixth, is it? He visited and he donated his vestry. Isn't that nice? He donated a bit of cloth. And you see, if you pay some money, this is in what's that? Dollars, is it? US dollars.
Yeah.
It seemed like US dollars was a second currency in the country. Everywhere you went, you could use US dollars or even euros.
Yeah.
And so if you pay some money, you can get a mass for you. David, how do you like that, mate? Just $15 and you can get a good mass.
That's 20 years of my life.
Yeah. You could have been really cheap here. And this is up there on Mount Beatitudes, you know. So yeah, it seems like the churches are really into commercial activities for the tourists. Everywhere you see donation boxes and those things. Everywhere you see. Then we went over to another church, a Catholic church of the Mensa Christi, which is the famous site of the Table of Christ. That's where, right at the end of Jesus' resurrection, he was back on the Sea of Galilee, and that's when he spoke to Peter and asked him, "Do you love me? Feed my sheep." He asked him like that 3 times, right? And that's in John. That is in John. And there's some sort of rock here that they're worshipping, this rock. I think maybe they're claiming that Peter or Jesus was standing on that rock at the time when he made that call to Peter. This is the Sea of Galilee down there next to that church. Then we went over to Capernaum is written in your Bible, but this is the site of Peter's house on the Sea of Galilee, and really it's Caphar, C-A-P-H-A-R, Caphar, Naam. This is of course anglicised form of Hebrew. Caphar means village, and Naam is of course a person's name, but the name means comfort or comforter. And as Trevor was pointing out, you can't go in if you've got your bare shoulders or your knees are showing. Waist, you can't have waist showing, no skin. So these are called church clothes. I mean, they're not church clothes, right? And so besides, I found it interesting that there's no smoking, no dogs, no automatic weapons, and no clothes of that nature. They're all in the same category. Because it's a holy site.
But remember, they charge you to go to the toilet.
In some places.
Oh, in there they do.
Oh, there they did.
Yeah.
But to be fair, if you did come with the wrong clothing on, they will give you like a sheet or something to wrap around and to cover up. And saw several girls wearing sort of things wrapped around them and so on. This is part of the building that was, I believe this is not even alleged. This is genuinely where Peter lived. This is correct. And this octagonal part is not, though. That was built later. And the way to see it was that in the centre part, the sort of square lines are actually the black lines, the actual original walls of Peter's house. So it was really, he really did live there. And remember, I think it was Peter's mother-in-law, wasn't it, that Jesus healed? Was it mother-in-law or mother? Mother-in-law. I think this is where this occurred. There was a large synagogue right in front of it as well. So after that, of course, we had lunch. And so we went and ate some of the fish that Peter...
We went swimming.
Yeah, some of us went swimming and some of us went and ate St. Peter's fish. The fish is called St. Peter's fish. And obviously it's not the same fish Peter ate because he ate them, you know. So, but who knows whether... Anyway, they're out of the Sea of Galilee. They genuinely are. And I think actually I ate chicken on that occasion. I think some of the others in our group did eat the fish though. And after that, we travelled then down from Tiberias. We travelled down along the Jordan Valley and through the Jordan Valley, which is very green, all irrigated from the water from the Sea of Galilee, which is all fresh water. It's the only freshwater lake in Israel. And we then went right down into the Jordan, to this region, which is there's a crossing point between Israel and Jordan, right? So you can drive right up to the Jordan River. This is the mucky thing there. Anyone ever seen the Yarra? You've seen the Yarra, haven't you? It's a river that runs upside down. It's an old joke, right, about the Yarra River. Well, this looks exactly the same. But they claim there this is where John the Baptist were baptizing and where he baptized Jesus. And you see people go there and the tourist shops sell these sort of sheets they put on and they go in there and they baptize themselves in the Jordan River. And they sell little empty bottles that you can go fill up. Did you bring yours back?
Not allowed to.
Oh, you're not allowed to bring Jordan River water back.
There you go.
There you go.
It's funny that the word Jordan means death.
Does it?
Yeah.
Oh.
And so if you get a baptism,
You come out to life.
you die and
Yeah, die to yourself. Yeah.
And when they walked through the Ark of Covenant, when they come through, the Israelites.
Yeah.
The river was fully flooded, and it was a fully flooded river of death.
So they sort of baptized themselves in it.
Now the Ark
Yeah.
represented, there's three things in the Ark,
Yeah.
represented Jesus Christ, every one of them.
Yeah.
The Word,
The
the
butter,
manna, and the water stood up in a heap and went back to a town called Adam. And so, Jesus Christ walked through a river of death and turned death back to the first man.
Are you talking about the Red Sea, though?
No, this is the Jordan.
When they crossed the Jordan into
Yeah,
Israel.
into
Into Israel.
yeah. So that's a spiritual take on it.
Very good.
It's interesting that, and the river was fully flooded.
Yeah.
Like you couldn't get death any
Yeah.
bigger.
Very good. Thank
See you
you.
guys.
Yeah. So just so you know where we are now, we had been up there, Tiberias, around the Sea of Tiberias, and we came down here. This is through the West Bank, but this is all desert, and we stopped at Qumran. First, we stopped at the Jordan River crossing here first.
On our way to the desert.
Yeah, and so this is Christina inviting you to go in to baptise yourself in the river, and there weren't too many brave souls who would go in, but one person did, and she went right in and she baptised herself there. And how did you feel when you came out?
I didn't get my hair wet.
Oh, you didn't fully immerse yourself. Doesn't quite work. That's a Catholic baptism. It's interesting, on the other side, this is the Jordan side, you see these officers, they're carrying automatic weapons. It's hard to see in the picture, but they are. There's only two of them. And on the other side were two Israeli soldiers. So I went up to them and I asked them what happens, and they said nothing. Both sides just sit there all day. They're on a 10-hour shift, and they rotate every 10 hours. Nothing ever happens. It's the most boring job that they can possibly get. But they said they spend more time taking photographs with tourists than doing anything else. But obviously, this whole arrangement, because Jordan is literally only, a few metres from Israel, it's obviously, there's a peace treaty between Israel and Jordan, and this whole arrangement's being worked out through that peace treaty. But if you were to swim across, you would need to take your passport with you because you're in a different country.
Oh.
And so they got those barriers. Each side has the barrier.
I got defined. Yeah.
Oh, you went into no man's land.
I did.
Ooh.
No one saw. That's the thing.
Okay, so from Jordan, I've already mentioned we were at Qumran. We won't go back there. We then went down from Jordan because we're heading right down towards the Dead Sea. And before we went there, we went up to this mountain, the Masada Fortress, which is the very famous site where 900 Jews are held out against the Romans, and eventually they committed mass suicide. They actually say only one person committed suicide. 899 were murdered and one committed suicide.
Anyway, that's a metallic model.
Yeah, that's a model.
Of the mountain.
That's right. And on one end of, this is also a model, on one end of the Masada, so this is it here on the believe, there's a Herod's palace. This is Herod the Great, right? Yeah, it's Herod the Great. His palace was built there, which he visited in period before Christ, slightly before Christ. At the time of Christ, or at the time of this, what do you call it? When the suicide, Herod had already gone. He was not involved, but he had gone there at some prior time. He had about 3 or 4 palaces. I've forgotten exactly how many. I think it was 3 around Israel, and this was one of them. It's quite a long way up, and there are several ways of getting up there, but just so you remember where we are now, this was the Jordan River crossing over there, and we've come down, and there should be a dot, Masada. Can you see Masada down the bottom there? down toward the end of the large section of the Dead Sea.
In the desert.
In the desert. And so then we got to there, and there's a sort of a cable car thing, and down there there's a hut. See, it's hard to see. That's it there, I think. So you can take the cable car up, or you can walk up if you like, and there's a trail. You see this trail here? It's called the Snake Trail. You can walk up there, but I think the day we were there it was over 40 degrees. It was terrible.
No, it wasn't that hot, wasn't it?
Well, it felt to me like it was. Only me felt like it was 40 degrees.
Spring weather.
But some of us who weren't so tough, we took the cable car up, and that proves your travel was really there. I don't know what you were saying.
He's got something in his mouth.
Pulling a face.
Yeah, it's very strange.
He's going, ooh, this is fun.
From the top, you can look out over the Dead Sea, and these are actually pools that have been constructed. This is at the southern end of the Dead Sea. They've made all these pools where they dry out the minerals. They extract the minerals and the salt from the ocean, and it's like one of the biggest industries in Israel, selling Dead Sea mud, Dead Sea minerals, face creams and body lotions and all this sort of stuff, right? Then we went on down to the Dead Sea, and some of the more braver souls got in the water, and that's Trevor there, believe it or not. And that's some of the other guys in our group.
That's a 15-year-old.
Oh, that's the Snowden boy. Yeah. And this is Dr. Humphreys out there floating away. It feels like oil.
Yeah.
That's what it feels like. It's really icky, and you can't sink in it. You shouldn't get it in your eyes or your mouth. Yeah.
The waters can be that deep and you can float in it.
Yeah. It's like you could sit in a chair like that. Right? Yeah. And so this one here, I think Christina demonstrates to us how to get out of the Dead
It's
Sea.
hard to get up.
So you're actually floating there,
Pretty
right?
much, yeah.
Is it like oil? Very oily?
But it's too hard to stand up.
Yeah. Notice what's on her face. Her face is the beauty treatment that she gets from the minerals from the bottom of the Dead Sea. So, and you look a lot better since then. You really do. From there, so we were down here, down the bottom of the Dead Sea area down there somewhere, and then we drove up to a place called Arad and went to what's known the Valley of Elah. And you all know this story, right? The Valley of Elah was where the Philistines were encamped one side and the Israelite army was encamped the other side of this. It's really a creek. It's pretty well all it is. And so this was the site of this famous battle. And you see where Gath and Ekron, these are the Philistine cities where the giant families of Goliath is a Goliath. In Hebrew it's Goliath. And this is the famous riverbed that you can walk up and down where David drew some of those smooth stones that he used to kill, or to knock Goliath out. And there's a number of these place markers that are in limestone that tell you the story explained in Hebrew. And notice in there are Ammonite fossils. So this limestone is called Jerusalem stone. This limestone is all over Israel, and it's loaded with fossils. Now, I find that quite significant, that the evidence of Noah's flood, the fossils that are buried in the flood sediments, are there in the signage of other stories in the Bible. And yet most of the atheists in Israel wouldn't see the significance of that, because they believe that those fossils died out millions of years ago. So we had the opportunity to see a reenactment. Two of our group were put on some clothing, some costumes, and they reenacted the story of David when he took his staff and his hand, chose those 5 small stones out of the brook and put them in his shepherd's bag, which he had, and his sling was in his hand, and he drew near to the Philistine, and the Philistine came on and drew near to David. And then, you know what happened? He killed him, and he's got his head cut off there. That's Goliath's head. So he conquered.
Actually, his
His
wig.
It's a wig. Oh yeah. No one was hurt in the reenactment.
I've actually got the stone that knocked Goliath out. It's made of blue paper.
Yeah, even the stone was a fake. Even though Christina brought back a pile of rocks from the river, the actual stone used wasn't even a real stone. That was even reenacted. And then we went to Jerusalem. Now, we're really flying around here. We went to several sites in Jerusalem, the Garden of Gethsemane, which is also, there's a Catholic church here. Garden of Gethsemane is down below on the lower level of the Mount of Olives. And this is the garden where Jesus slept, remember, the night of the crucifixion, and a lot of significant stuff happens there, but most significantly is the case where Judas betrayed Jesus and gave him that kiss, right? The kiss of death, it's called, isn't it?
Yeah.
Was that the actual garden or electric garden?
I think this one is very close to the actual garden, yes. I mean, some sites, they're just alleged.
But there's at least 2 places where they think it could have been.
No, not Gethsemane. This is the only one for Gethsemane. Yeah. So this one, I think, it's interesting at the church, as Trevor points out, please no explanations inside the church. Now that translation is the old paganised churches will never give out the true gospel. Right? It's kind of code, right?
Yeah.
Well, those signs are everywhere. In all the different churches, they're saying no explanations. And what they actually mean, the tour guides are not meant to give the explanations to their tour groups inside the church. But I think it's ironic because the old churches are dead.
Has 2 meanings.
Is that to keep the people quiet?
Yes, that's right, because there's so many tour groups, and it would just be like, be babble. If in some cases, they're actually even running their sacred services and things like in those churches. Yeah. So we went then over to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, and as the name gives it away, this is the traditional site of both Golgotha as well as the site of the sepulchre where Jesus was buried. One of the alleged ones, David.
Yeah.
There's 2, maybe 3. This is the one that's traditionally claimed to be the site. The other one, the other main one, is called the Garden Tomb, where both Golgotha and the sepulchre are meant to be, right? But it has less scholarly support. In the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, there are many different churches represented. It's a massive structure. And I'll just show you a couple here. One is this Roman Catholic shrine. It's all very dark. Everything's very dark, motifs, and very
Musty smelling.
Very Byzantine.
Like a dungeon.
No one has taken any detergent to it in at least 1,000 years, I'd say. And you see a group of these women here, they're literally kissing this stone.
Yeah, they are.
Literally. They were like frantically trying to get close to this stone to kiss it. This stone was a covering of some tomb or something. Maybe they even might think it's actually the covering of Jesus' tomb or something.
They did. The nuns said that to me. I asked them.
Yeah. We went down to where the alleged tomb is. So this is one of these spots. You go in here in this doorway, and there's these 2 sort of holes cut into the rock. And you see the candles burning here. One of them is meant to be where Jesus laid, right? But Trevor came out, and obviously he is risen. That's what he said. He is risen. Thank you, Jesus. Hallelujah, right? Everyone happy about that, aren't they? You know? Because you know what? We couldn't find him in there. He's definitely risen. There's no question about it. And his bones weren't there either. So we know that he is risen. This was an Armenian church. there's a shrine, sort of a chapel thing in the back there, and this is the Armenian guy watching over it. And I noticed they trying to collect money for these candles, so people burn the candles. So it didn't matter what denomination; they were all selling candles or something. You know, all of that same spirit, that same Catholic type of spirit. And this one even says, "God loves a cheerful giver." You know that. We went then around to. I hope you're enjoying this. I hope it's not too boring. You know, because I mean, there's lots that happened, right? This was weeks. So this one particular instance I thought was really interesting because it was really hot that day. We're up the top, sort of escaping being down in that dark church, and I listened. And this soldier, she's from the Israeli Defense Force, and she's speaking English to this group of tourists, like we have a tour guide, and there were tour groups everywhere like that, and it would seem to be she was the tour guide for this group, but if you sat there and listened to her, she was preaching the gospel to them. She was telling them the whole story of Christ, but she wasn't holding back in any way at all. She was giving them a full gospel message, which I thought was...
The funny thing was that we were all praying, because Gideon was right.
Oh, that's right,
He wasn't interested in praying. He started zeroing in his camera and listened.
I was trying to hear what she was saying.
Yeah, but I went over and listened to it. Yeah.
Because I heard her say that Jesus was a perfect sacrifice.
Yeah.
You couldn't have a perfect sacrifice apart from Jesus.
And from the accents of the people listening, I think they were Americans. That sounds like American accents.
Wow.
Then we went over to the second place that's the alleged Golgotha, the place of the skull. And you see there's an Arab bus station, and there's this sort of rock structure here where this space appears in it. And they call this, see the eyes, the nose, and the mouth down here. This is known as the place of the skull. So it's one of those alleged sites of Golgotha. And there's a famous guy, that's called Skull Hill, but this guy, Major General Charles Gordon, visited Jerusalem in 1883, and he was promoted this site as the actual Golgotha site. He's quite a famous military commander, but he wasn't the first one who came up with this, but he was the one that sort of was well known and promoted it. And he was much influenced by this other guy called Kondur, who was somewhat of a scholar, and they promoted this idea. I found an old photograph on the internet back in 1901. You see, this is the northern wall of the old city of Jerusalem, and this site is outside the city of Jerusalem, of course, and you can see the skull there. Can you see it there? There it is there, right? That's it there. Yeah. So you can sort of see why they've made that claim. And in the garden next to that is this other site where they claim this was discovered, this tomb was discovered. By the time it was discovered, the limestone had all been somehow eroded away, so this was bricked up, but nothing else has been changed from when it was first discovered several hundred years ago. And of course there's the door. Was the door on it? Do you remember if the door was on that? The door, it's a wooden door. No, this door here. So, of course, there's modern engraving on that door, but there's a channel here where a large stone could be rolled up and down. So maybe that wooden door.
That stone was just over here.
Yes.
Yeah, over on the side.
Over here.
Yeah.
But I think the door may have been put on as well.
Yeah, that one.
You know, it was discovered 200 years ago. I'm not saying the door may have been put on 500 years ago or something like that. I don't know. I can't remember. So we went inside and had a look to see if he was in there. And this over here on the right, there's two channels like this, one over here and one over here, and that's where they laid the bodies in this tomb. But Jesus is not. Look, just looking at the door close up, it's very modern construction. It's definitely no more than like 30 years old. But again, whether you're not sure or not, he's definitely risen because the science says so. Yeah, he does. And also at the garden, we had communion. We had communion. This is our group, and Dr. John Baumgartner led us for communion there. I thought it's a very pleasant sight. But does anyone here know about Ron Wyatt? Ron Wyatt, you do.
Yep.
You do? Ron Wyatt claimed to have discovered all sorts of things, right? For example, wagon wheels from the Pharaoh's chariots, Mr. and Mrs. Noah's wedding rings, and famously the Ark of the Covenant he was supposed to have claimed. Also Noah's Ark in Turkey. John Baumgartner in his younger days, went with Ron Wyatt to a number of these sites. One of them was the Ron Wyatt Noah's Ark site, which John, as a geophysicist, took ground-penetrating radar, magnetometers and so on, and found nothing. But on this occasion, he came to this garden tomb, and over the back there, there's like a limestone wall where John had come with Wyatt on this occasion because Ron Wyatt had told him he knew where the Ark of the Covenant was, and it was down inside this cave. They came there about 4 o'clock on the day, and they managed to break a small hole to look through into this cavity where Wyatt said the Ark would be found. And therefore, I think they were expecting something like some implements as well, like implements of temple worship implements or something like that, or the Holy Grail or something like that, I don't know. And so they broke through there, and is this right? Did they see a glint or something?
Yeah.
They saw a glint of light, but it was already failing. Light was already failing on the day, so they decided to come back the next morning and do a more thorough investigation. And the hole was too small to get in at that stage, so they have to make it larger to actually go in there and have a look. The next morning they came back, and John managed to get the hole bigger, and he went in there, and they found absolutely nothing in there. There was no Ark of the Covenant, and I don't know what Mr. Wyatt said after that, but it's gone. If you read, I think it's Revelation 12, was it 11? 11. The last verse in Revelation 11, you'll see it says the Ark of the Covenant was found in heaven. So after the Babylonian exile, there's no mention in the Bible of the Ark, but I think at some point God took it up to heaven because we see it recorded in Revelation.
The claim was it was Jeremiah's cave that he discovered.
This particular cave.
Yeah, this Ron Wyatt.
Yeah, but whatever it was, there was no Ark in there, and John was there as an eyewitness, you know. But also, John explained to me the whole story of the Ark investigation, and where all the work he did. This was actually quite an operation that they did, and there was no evidence whatsoever of metal structures or forms of the boat or anything. In fact, the particular rock formation in the mountains of Ararat, there are about 4 of them that look exactly the same. So if the one that Ron Wyatt, which also this guy Roberts from Sydney and Jonathan Gray were involved in, I think he was involved in that as well. If that was really the Noah's Ark, then there are 4 Noah's Arks. Because actually there's 4 rock formations that are actually the same in the mountains. If you look at aerial photographs, you can see there are these 4 of them. They're not one. In fact, I believe they're just a natural rock formation, a mud flow that came in the post-flood period. And I'm not denying the existence of the Ark, but they didn't find it. That's all. So I thought this was interesting because John, while we were there, he told us this whole story about that.
He has a video on YouTube or something about
Oh,
it.
yeah.
There's a lot of information on this.
Yeah, that John himself was in one of those videos.
Yeah. And in fact, there's a lot of documents. CMI have a big write-up on their website about the Noah's Ark, that one, not this story. No. Okay, pretty well one of the last things we did in the tour was we went to Hezekiah's tunnel. Now this, remember, is the old city. This is the Temple Mount. There's the Dome of the Rock up there. The old city comes down here. Kidron Valley is down here. You're coming right down here. So the old temple wall, the old city wall came around here somewhere, about here. And down here was a water source. Over here, there was a source of water. And they had to get the water inside of the city, because when the enemies came, they can't go down this structure here, and the water was in this spring down there, but they exposed themselves outside the city. So Hezekiah ordered they dig a tunnel through the limestone. The tunnel goes underground, all underneath here, and so it goes from outside the city. This was outside the city walls at that time, and comes inside the city walls. I'm not sure what wall that is, but it was outside the city walls at the time of Hezekiah, and it stops in the pool of Shiloh here.
But the tunnel we went through, and you went through, was much shorter than that.
No, same one.
No, it's the
Same one. Now, we walked through a tunnel that came out, stopped about here somewhere, to another pool called the Silwan Pool. This last part you can't walk through because it's been converted into a sewer. And it smelled like it too. But we walked through the one that wasn't the sewer part. The section we walked through...
But how do you know? Because you couldn't see it, it was all dark.
Okay, I'll show you in a minute. So this is going down to Hezekiah's tunnel. That's our guide. That's the back of her anyway. That's the most you can see of her. And this is the entrance to the section. It's 530 metres long. It's total darkness. There's no lights. The space is like as wide as your body, and maybe a little bit higher than your head. And its depth of water is, say, up to about 70 centimetres deep, but generally it's only about this deep most of the way. They allow 40 minutes for someone to walk through it, and then you come through, and that's the first thing you see. And you go, oh, thank goodness I made it, I got out, you know. So, well, you could, you could.
How do you keep your torch on?
Yeah, so you have your own torch, and they sell torches at the entrance for like $2 or $1, very cheap. Tiny little sort of LED things, yeah. And some of us came out. Did everyone who went in come out? I think so. So only about half of the group went through the water tunnel, and the other half went through a dry tunnel, Canaanite one. But I just mentioned that this guy sitting in the middle there, that one there, he was the winner. He came out first. He did it in less than 20 minutes. And the others, he had to sit around waiting until the other mob came out. Another 5 minutes later, Yeah. That's me, by the way. So those who didn't walk through the 20-minute long dark tunnel in water, cold water by the way, freezing cold water, walked down the dry tunnel section.
So narrow.
Yeah, this is a Japanese friend of mine, Toru-san. He sent me this photograph. I don't know how he got a photograph of him walking through the dry tunnel. You took it for him, did you? So you walk that in 5 minutes. So the dry section, which was a Canaanite tunnel, takes 5, and they say the water one takes 40, which fast people like me did it under 20. And it comes out, eventually it comes out to the pool of Shalom. And this is the pool of Shalom. There's no water in it anymore. It's completely dried up. Okay, that's it.